Good evening. I know many of you have been wondering what was going to happen when this thing started, but I got to tell you, this is the beginning of the revolution. I know you don't really understand that because you're thinking, well, what the hell is he talking about, revolution? What I am talking about is this show. We're just talking here, and that's, by the way, not my first choice of a name. The first choice I had for a name was, what the fuck is wrong with you people? But couldn't use that. Somebody else already was. And then the other one was, look, I'm just saying, and that was also used. So I couldn't use what I wanted to use, so I'm stuck here using we're just talking here, and I may end up changing that. Uh, for those of you that were paying attention, I started uh, by doing a little show last week. Actually, I didn't start last week. I had a pretty good rant last week, um, and so now I'm just using this. And now I just set out the chat pop out. So if you guys want to chat, be my guest. Allow links. Okay. All right. Uh, says here that the VU meter is recording my voice. That's excellent. I'm going to record each section for 10 minutes, and then I'm going to uh, save it and upload it to YouTube, and hopefully also upload it to Facebook. So let me just type in here that now broadcasting. Update. Let's see if it frickin' works this time. Good. Uh, so that's working. One of the things I did talk about last time was what was going on with consumerism and what we were doing about the dollar and what was going on. Now I had an interesting conversation with Greg Garrettson. He's an old friend of mine. Old. We went to high school together, as a matter of fact. I haven't heard from him in years, but we just recently hooked up on Facebook. And we had a very interesting discussion. One of the things he took issue with was that he didn't agree with me that the dollar was just a piece of paper and we decide what it's worth. He thought that it was subject to supply and demand because the more dollars there are, the less we consider them to be. Now that in and of itself is incorrect. Okay. What I was saying was things only have relative value, and I'm quoting directly from my response to him. He said, I agree with your point about consumerism, but not about the dollar. You say the dollar is worthless because it's a mere piece of paper and derives its value from our consensus. That is true. That is what I say. He said, I would agree in part. However, there's really a law of supply and demand. The dollar isn't only an abstract concept and simply worth what we say it is. It is currency, so it is subject to the law of supply and demand. And then he gave an example of what happens if there were fewer dollars and more dollars. Um, and he also says, for the same reason, a diamond is worth more than a grain of sand, independent of our consensus. That's where he went astray, because a diamond is only worth more than a piece of paper because we determined it is, because we say it is. So I went on to say that his concept was flawed because a diamond isn't any more valuable than sand. It's only because we perceive it as such. Okay, and that dollars are symbolic, and as symbols, they are open to change. He then responded, but about he liked what I said about shifting the paradigm and going back towards manufacturing to mitigate what's going on with our spending and not being quite so consumerist. Uh, but he asked a specific question: is how do you escape the programming? I'm going to give you an example of the programming. The programming that we're going through. where they're telling us that we're worth less because we don't spend enough money, and that's how we're judged in society, is because we spend this money. And if you don't have top of the line, and if you don't have the best car, if you don't get the Hummer, and you don't get the new 3D TV, and you don't get the latest computer gadget phone thing, you're considered less, which is unfortunately true. And if you listen to your kids, they'll tell you, "Mom, I gotta have this new thing, otherwise, uh, my life will be over at school," and they'll make fun of me because they will. Okay, that's part of the programming. But in order to counteract this programming, first you have to understand that it is programming, that you're being brainwashed. Okay, it's everywhere, it's pervasive throughout our society. We call it advertising. Now, advertising, when you originally think about it, you think, oh, it's there to promote a product. And we need to make the product attractive. So what do? We find attractive people. But what do we consider attractive? What we consider attractive is a physical non-norm. Okay, it's these super buff, super healthy people, which if we really worked at it, we could maintain. But quite frankly, it's a lot of hard work. And there's only so many hours in the day. You got to spend 8 hours a day at your job earning money, which is valued less because there's more of it around, and inflation has gone up, and you don't have the time to spend another 6 hours in the gym every day getting those perfect abs. So what they do is they use these model people with the perfect abs, and they try to sell you things. They sell you everything from diet pills, which means you don't have to go to the gym and work out 6 hours a day to get these perfect abs. They say, oh, all you need to take is this pill. And they also show you dresses that don't fit you, and little skinny waif models that aren't you, and these great big tall buff guys with chiseled chins that aren't men. Men work, men sweat. Even white collar men sweat, mostly due to stress, which is a killer, by the way. So in order to get beyond our programming, we have to realize that it's there. That's the first issue. Another friend of mine, Mark Bard, I want to say Mark Board, but it's Mark Bard, double A, RD, posted an article about surveillance. And surveillance only works when you don't know you're under it. And that's true. You only don't know that you're under when you're under surveillance. That's the only time surveillance works, because when you do understand that you're under surveillance, you're constantly on your best behavior. You're constantly, okay, because the cameras are watching. So you're either trying to perform for the camera in some manner, shape, or form, or you're on your best behavior so that you don't attract the attention of those who are watching the camera feeds. But that's a double-edged sword, as you see things like this occur. The reason I am on this right now, talking to you live on Ustream, and it's not for my 15 minutes of attention, which I would kind of dig, If I actually had my 15 minutes of attention, I wouldn't mind it. And but I'm really doing it more as a way to engage other people. And this is the last way we have to do it. I have phones where I talk to people, and I like talking to people, but that's usually for my friends. This is a way for me to interact with people who aren't necessarily my friends, people I don't necessarily know, but might like to know. And it's also a way for me to have my own therapy, right? And not have to go to a fucking psychiatrist where I have to worry about how he's interpreting what I'm doing. Okay, I'm going to pick up this discussion in just a moment on section 2. This is more about the psychology of talking to a psychologist. Okay, so bear with me. Section 1 was brought to you by the NATF, or NTAF, the National Transplant Assistance Fund. And I'll talk more about that in our third segment tonight.